If you're thinking about changing your pedals, here's a quick review and installation guide for the Odyssey Twisted PC and PC Pro BMX pedals. So I tend to use Odyssey pedals quite a bit on my bikes, and there's two main sizes, right? You got your Twisted PC, which stands for polycarbonate, and you've got your Twisted PC Pro, which, as you can see, has a bigger foot pad, but the pins are a little different. So this is more concave, and you'll see riders like Matt Rickard are using this smaller size, which has more pins, and then you've got this larger one, which is, again, the bigger foot pad, and it's also got a bigger standoff from the crank arm. So if you see these, pretty short, and then you've got an extra couple of millimeters there. One thing I want to point out is that they're pretty cheap, right? $13.99, $16.99. I see these things usually for $20 or $25 at the bike shop. This was at one of the larger big box stores, and simple to install, right? You basically need just a 15mm wrench to get on there, and just remember one side is going to be reverse thread. Another thing I want to point out is that if you find there's a little binding here in the bearing, you can take off this end cap with a small screwdriver, and there's a little nut in there on the shaft, so you can loosen the nut, tighten the nut, and that should alleviate some of the binding you might find. It's only happened to me on one pedal, but rather than replace both pedals, you can sometimes just fix it by working that nut. So I'll detail the installation, which is pretty straightforward, and then I'll also show you why I choose to use the large pedals for the most part on some of my bikes, though I have spent 600 miles on the smaller Twisted PCs on my Big Ripper. So here we are, we're going to change the left one, and the reason for the larger pedals that I want on this monster quad is this relationship here between the tip of the pedal and the tire. So as you'll notice when you put your foot on it, I sometimes scrub my toes and the tip of my shoes on the tire. So I want a pedal that's going to be a little further out this way, and it just gives me a bit more space, more real estate that I can plant my foot to provide power, right? I can move my foot around a little bit easier and not have to worry about it so much. Important to note, there's a left-hand thread on the left-hand side, so from this position, you're going to loosen it by going this way, right? So it's reverse. Typically it's righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, but on this one it's going to be righty-loosey. And as I start to take this off, you'll notice on the forged aluminum crank arms on the Fast Ripper, Monster Quad, Fat Quad, etc., there's going to be a little washer that you'll find to help you ensure that your pedals stay on. And I'll see if I can't show it to you here. Another thing to note is that, okay, so there's the washer, and then you can see that there's some serrations on the edge there. Also note, I like to use a little bit of grease on these threads. It helps prevent damage to the threads in the crank arms, which are very expensive, and you can pretty much use any kind of grease. I'm using some, I guess, synthetic brake parts or ceramic brake lubricant, which I have from car stuff in my garage. So here we go, we're gonna put this one on. See the serrations, you see the washer. You gotta remember it's righty-tighty. Oh no, lefty-tighty on this side. So I'll screw that in, and then I'll get the other one going, and then we'll see some actual footage of the foot and the pedal. So when you're tightening these, you want them on tight, but you don't want them on so tight that you can't remove them. So basically I put my foot on one side, and then I've got this, and I lift from the back, and that's about it. Like feels like it's about 20-25 foot-pounds of torque, if I was to guess. So now we've got our bigger pedals on. Because they're spaced out a little wider, I've got a little bit more clearance here for my toes and the front of my shoes. So that's the reason I went to these wide platforms on the Monster Quad. Oh, one thing I forgot to point out, I do notice that these concave pedals allow the sole of your shoe to kind of sink in, and it provides a little bit more traction if you're doing things like jumping or trying to pull up on the bike with the pedals. I do think the smaller pins kind of dig into your shoe a bit more. So I think if you're doing aerial type work or really moving the bike around with your feet and you're off the seat, and then these smaller pedals do seem to work better for that, and the wider ones are just better for putting power down and adjusting the angle of where you want to put your shoe, whether it's in the middle or off to the side, etc. Here's a quick shot of Matt Rickard's bike. You can see that he rubs his feet against the crank arms quite a bit, and I'm not sure if that's for additional stability or just because he has size 18 feet. Typically I use the big pedals on all my bikes, but I use the smaller ones on my Big Ripper, and you can see here it's because there's a big distance between the front tire and the pedal. Part of this is because I space the crank arm out, and the other reason is because the front end is so long on the 2021 Big Ripper that there's more clearance. You can see the relationship here on the Monster Quad and then the Fast Ripper. It's a little bit closer, the front tire to your feet. One, because the tire's so big on the Monster Quad, and two, the Fast Ripper frame and the Fast Ripper front end are smaller than your typical Big Ripper. So, which pedal is best for you? Well, it really comes down to the size of your feet, the type of riding you're doing, the size of the bike you're riding, and then what color you like, right? I mean, ultimately, we want to have fun on our bikes, so if you can get by with whatever pedal you're using, more power to you. If you want to change, you've got a bigger Odyssey to choose from, a smaller one, which is great for jumping and pulling up with your feet, and there's plenty of options out there. So whatever you do, make sure you keep your feet on the pedals and enjoy the ride. Thanks for watching Dad Mode Wheelie Gang.